Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. Collecting autographs is one of the most popular hobbies in the United States, but it's also a hobby that is fraught with danger from fakes and forgeries. My guest today is an expert on autographs, a collector for many years. He is Tim Beck from Wingo, Kentucky in Graves County, but a native of Lyon County and a graduate of the school when it was PCC. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Let's begin with the very first autograph you collected. It is this, and I see the young Tim Beck getting an autograph from...
R. Sergeant Shriver.
How did you get that?
He was the Democratic nominee for vice president. Senator Tom Eagleton had dropped out due to the discovery of him having seen a psychiatrist, which was rather taboo in those days. And my father was meeting with him at a labor unions conference in the Bellevue Stratford Legionnaire Hall,
In
disease fame,
right
in Philadelphia at the time.
and so you're a little kid here, about how old?
12 years old, looked like Chicken Little.
Okay.
And we're standing there with the Secret Service, and he's as bored as we are, and he asked, "Have you ever thought about getting an autograph?" Well, I hadn't. So he volunteered a pen and ink pen and said, "Just wait right here." When he came out, and he signed for me and my sister. And by the time we got back to Eddyville, a week later, it was in the paper, and I realized I had done something. I had connected with this famous person, and hence history. And
Is that the fun of autograph collecting, the fact that you've got a piece of paper or a baseball or an object that was actually touched and autographed by a famous person?
I believe it is. To me, it is that you collect history. And of course, when I went to school here, I was history and political science major, and I've always loved history. And this is just another aspect of collecting history and collecting memories associated with the history one collects.
How many autographs do you suppose you have? You ever counted them all?
Well, you always have duplicates, that you'll always have 20 or 30 of some favorite person, and you may have one like the Babe Ruth, but I've got approximately 10,000 autographs. And it's taken about 33, 34 years to do that. Sometimes I didn't collect that hard, like when I was in school here, I had other things to do, and sometimes you collect heavy, just depends on your mood.
Well, now, how did you get your autographs? Obviously, Sergeant Shriver, you happen across him. May I have your autograph? He does it, and away you go.
Well,
What are the other ways?
When I started doing this in the 70s and 80s, it was not the big business it is today. There was no eBay, there were no baseball signing shows, there were no dealers on street corners, autographs versus fake purses when you go through New York. And it was a very, very close-knit, smaller faction of the world, if you'd say, or that you could actually write someone, that you get to know them, and you could actually build a relationship with them. Nowadays, big ticket movie prices, security, fan mail companies that sign for these people, it would be impossible to do that at that level today.
Let's just go through it. You brought some of your autographs along. Here is one from a television series that some of us who are a little older might remember, The Golden Girls.
Yes, sir.
And here are the Golden Girls, nicely framed and matted, nice picture. How did you go about getting all of them to autograph this?
I bought the card signed by all four from a very trusted dealer that I have known for years. And I went to a store locally and had it matted in what I thought would have been Golden Girl colors from watching the show. Very, very bright, very colorful, very upbeat, very Floridian, if you would. And I turned a $50, $60 autograph into like a $100 piece that way, because it's very pleasant to look at now, and I've still got the autograph. It's colorful, and it reminds you more of the show that way.
Now, you mentioned dealers. There is where you can get in trouble, and I speak from experience, having been cheated by a dealer who was arrested by the FBI. How does one avoid getting a fake autograph?
Well, that would depend on what venue that they were buying it in.
eBay, for example.
Tread carefully. Buyer beware, as we say in the real estate business. What you have to worry about, if you see an eBay item that you really like to have, don't push buy it now. Do some research on the dealer. Do some research on the item. If it's a private auction, I'd stay away from it. Any dealer on eBay that doesn't want you to know who he sold to or what he sold, that's pretty easy figuring on the front end, Barry. Now, there are occasions when that you'd use private feedback, private information. If you were selling something very valuable, a painting, a sketch from a famous artist or something to protect the buyer's personality. But when you go through their feedback and you look at their prior sales, if it's all private and it's all sports related or whatever, or or entertainment related, but you got a problem, just stay away from them. There's 250,000 autographs on eBay right now, and the so-called experts and pseudo experts, they say that 1 out of 10 is real. I say probably 1 out of 100 is real. So don't be in a hurry. If it's plentiful enough that you want it and you've heard of the person, you'll find it sooner or later from someone you feel comfortable with in a method and manner you feel comfortable with.
But to be on the safe side, eBay is not a good place to buy autographs.
Not for the beginner, not for the newcomer, and not for someone that can't afford to get burned.
Right. So how do you locate an autograph dealer, for example? You mentioned before the show there's a magazine, a collector's magazine.
There is a magazine called The Autograph Collector. It can be bought locally at a bookstore in Paducah. And there are advertisements throughout the magazine. Dealerships that offer autograph signatures, whatnot, they can belong to different organizations like the UACC, which stands for the Universal Autograph Collectors Club, the Manuscript Society. That doesn't keep them from making a mistake and buying a bad autograph and passing it to you when that you think that you're dealing with someone reputable. It doesn't make them less reputable, it just means that they made a mistake and you didn't know any better. If you're buying something from a dealer, on or off eBay, on or off the internet, look for something that's been authenticated by PSA, JSA, or GAI.
What does all that stand for?
Well, James Spence Authenticators, that's JSA, he started PSA, which was a pro sports authenticator. They actually, forensically, like I do, they can magnify, and they can look at signatures, and they have hundreds and thousands of different exemplars to go by. And once that they feel it's authentic and insurable and authentic, they actually daub it with some invisible to the eye ink that you can actually hold up and fluoresce under a light. And there's stickers, and there's an online registry. There's ways of doing this where that you have taken better care of your money and better care of the hobby.
Right. So again, pick a reputable dealer and stick with that person.
Yes, as my father used to say, if it feels wrong, it is wrong.
Yeah. And if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Absolutely.
Now, you also authenticate autographs, and you talked a little bit about that. Let's just hold up here is Fred Gwynn, better known as Herman Munster, right here. Let's say someone brought this to you and said, I think I have a genuine Fred Gwynn autograph, but I'm not sure. And here's the autograph. How can you tell by looking at that signature that Fred Gwynn actually did that?
Well, the first thing I would do, if it wasn't mine in my own collection, I would have it out of the mat. That I would use magnification, I'd use light, I would use different exemplars to look at it with, and also know Fred Gwynn's signature very, very well. He did not sign much at all in the 90s. He was older. His last big movie was My Cousin Vinny, and he's one of the most forged signatures on eBay right now.
Really?
Absolutely, because he's not like he's around. He can say, I signed that or didn't sign it.
Ah.
And I brought that one today just as an example of the card I bought from a trusted dealer and matted in appropriate colors, which makes it more attractive.
Well, now, would it be, let's say you have a den and you're a big TV and movie fan, what about hanging these on the wall as decoration, conversation pieces? Is that okay to do that?
Absolutely. I've done that myself.
And it won't destroy the autograph?
If you're going to do that, you need to frame it, mat it with acid-free materials, non-glare glass. Try to put it where that they won't get a lot of light from outside sources, windows, open, closed, or whatnot. If you're going to be in the TV room, I would put it beside the TV because nobody has their TV where a light hits it anyway, because of being able to see it. So that's just one suggestion.
That's very good. Again, on the subject of television, Autograph, a very popular television program, Sanford and Son.
Personal favorite.
Excellent, excellent autograph here. And again, you matted these yourself?
No, sir. I bought that one the way it is, along with these other 2 or 3 from Autograph World. He's been in business since the 1980s. Bob Jones owns it. He's on the internet, autographworld.com. Very trusted dealer. I think he's probably voted the #1 dealer in the whole United States the last 2 or 3 years in a row.
So you would be perfectly safe if someone to get started as an amateur, that's a good place to start.
He has my credit card information.
Well,
there you go.
There you are. So, another television program from a few years ago, Chico and the Man.
Jack Arberson and Freddie Prinze Sr.
Absolutely. Most young people know Freddie Prinze Jr. That's his dad. How did you get those?
Bought it from Autograph World.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now we come to probably the most famous Western series, Bonanza.
Still watch it in the morning.
Not on prime time.
TV Land.
TV Land. And once again, this is also purchased, I can see on the back, from Autograph World.
They're all deceased, and I really think a lot of them in the show. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Dan Blocker that played Hoss Cartwright when I was little. They came to the rodeo in Saxton, Missouri.
J.C. Boot Hill
And
Rodeo.
he was on a horse, and I remember him shaking my finger. I remember that real well.
Huge man.
So I've had a strong affinity for him in that show ever since.
Well, okay. Now we get into some very historical autographs.
Top drawer.
Top drawer stuff. Give us a left to right on these.
Top left would be John Lennon.
John Lennon,
Yes.
famous Beatle. How did you get that one?
Bought that from a very good friend of mine that got that in person in 1969. And I'm very proud of that one.
Is that a good way to get autographs from friends who actually were there?
I think so, because if you cut out 2 or 3 middlemen, and if you got the kind of friends you ought to have, then that you've got the provenance to go with it, that you feel comfortable with the origin of it.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the other ones?
Right beside John Lennon would be U.S. Grant. I collect presidents, and I brought that one for you. I know that you're a history military buff.
Absolutely.
And that's signed on the back of a bill head from a store at the particular time. Somebody actually saw him in the 1800s, and they grabbed a bill head off the old counter at the old general store and had him sign it. And it's here some 150 years later.
Any idea of whether he signed that as president or as a general or retired, or do you know?
Well, that you can't see the bill head from here, but it was a generic store, and I could not figure that out. Had it had a date, obviously, had it been a store that you could have Googled and found out what store and state it was in, was he in the South or the North at that time, you could figure it out. Mm-hmm. But that's just an impossibility. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And the other autographs?
Well, that's Albert Einstein on the bottom left. I actually acquired that from one of the original autograph collectors in this area. He was from Old Eddyville. He had a movie theater, and he used to collect autographs.
And who's that?
Colonel L.B. Fuquay.
Okay.
From Old Eddyville.
Well, how did he come about Albert Einstein's autograph?
He wrote and asked for it. It's just that plain simple. He wrote him at Princeton University and got the photo.
Now, you used to do that, didn't you?
I used to do that too. In the 1980s, the late 70s, I was a prolific writer, absolutely. And
well, now let's say, for example, one wanted Albert Einstein's autograph. How do you, dear Mr. Einstein, I want your autograph? I mean, how do you do that?
Dear Professor Einstein is probably more thoughtful of the professor designation as you would be the mister.
Right.
And just try to connect with the person.
Maybe mention something about the theory of relativity, or in that case, or...
Well, if he was around today and was doing that, I think I'd mention his sweater, his hair. They'd probably get a better response. Absolutely.
Oh, something personal, something
Absolutely,
funny.
Because everybody's going to mention the other, aren't they?
Yeah. All right, let's say, for example, you wanted to get an autograph of, let's say, Bruce Willis. What are the odds of you succeeding with that?
I did good in the 1980s. I had him sign the front of an Us magazine, if you remember Us magazine.
Yeah? Yeah.
I sent it through the mail. I sent it to his house, and it came back within 30 days.
Well,
I wouldn't even attempt that
with
now.
what kind of... Well, now, what's the between today and the 1980s?
Well, then, that he might have gotten maybe 200 or 300 requests a week, and he would actually look at the ones he wanted to. And when I sent him the Us magazine, I sent it to him. I sent an envelope to him to put it back in, pre-addressed, stamped, where all I had to do was open it up and sign it.
Is that helpful? That's a good idea.
Sure it is.
Yes.
But nowadays, when you send anything to anyone famous in the entertainment industry, 9 out of 10 people use a company called Studio Fan Mail. And that you get either a preprint, a fake signature, an auto pen signature, a secretarial signature, if you get anything back at all. Absolutely. There's such a stark contrast between the stars of today that are making $20 million movie, as opposed to the ones in the 70s, 80s making $1 million movie. They were a lot nicer and a whole lot more accessible back then.
Mm-hmm. So is it worth the effort to even try today to do a famous movie star?
I would get creative. I would try to, if I lived in New Jersey and I wanted an autograph of a Hollywood star, if I had a friend in California, that's my first line of defense. movie premieres, somebody that knows someone, you know, that you got to thank and act accordingly.
Okay, the other ones on this board are?
That is the personal favorite of mine, Babe Ruth. If you're going to collect autographs, if you're going to collect baseball autographs, you got to have Babe Ruth.
Oh, that's the holy grail, undoubtedly.
For the sports collector, absolutely.
It is. How did you come by that one?
Bought that from a gentleman in Las Vegas, Nevada. He had bought it from a gentleman that had collected Yankees autographs, and he had died. And he got it through his son. And it's authenticated by Jim Spence, who started the main authentication company in the United States. And there's no doubt in my mind it's authentic, or I wouldn't have bought it, but the extra authentication just makes one sleep better at night, if you would. And should you ever want to get rid of it, which I have no intention of doing, but I observed that I could come near getting rid of it to a person like you that way than I could without it, couldn't I?
Yes.
After what you went through.
I've learned my
Absolutely.
lesson. Yeah. Any more on that side? I can't
No,
see
sir.
the side. On the back, a fascinating letter from Theodore Roosevelt discussing the Progressive Party, dated, let me look before I flip it around, I believe that is 1913. Teddy Roosevelt, of the presidential autographs, which are the rarest?
Everybody likes John Kennedy. He's also full of snares. I think he had probably 100 different known people that signed or machines signed for him over the years. It's so extremely hard to get an authentic John
And hard
Kennedy.
to prove that it's
Absolutely, because of his, by his own admission, his autograph would change weekly. Style, pain, prescription, medicine, whatever.
Right.
Just really hard to pin down. And of course, everybody loves George Washington. Everybody loves Abraham Lincoln.
Now let's be crass and talk money here. What would an authentic George Washington signature go for? I know it would depend on the document, but let's just say a slip of paper with his name on it.
And the time.
Uh-huh.
And pencil or quill pen, you know, that's what you get into.
Okay. Well, let's just say a quill pen signed on a piece of paper, a square piece of paper, just the signature George Washington.
G. Washington.
G.
George,
Washington.
GEO. Washington. I would say probably $11,000-$12,000. Absolutely.
And if it were on a significant document, of course, the sky's the limit.
Depending on the document, anywhere from $15,000 to $35,000. And there's quite a bit of that out there because people realized who he was at the time, and they've kept him and had him down for years.
Do you have a Washington autograph?
I have quite a few presidential autographs. I have almost a whole set, I'll put it that way.
How about Lincoln? Very valuable as well, I'm sure.
Not as valuable as John Kennedy's getting to be, and not as valuable as, say, someone like Washington the absolutely.
So what would it typically, let's say you were hunting for a Lincoln autograph.
Well, that you need to be prepared to spend about $4,000 or $5,000 for a good just A. Lincoln.
That's the way he normally signed his name.
That's the way that he normally signed. The rarest Lincoln autograph would be that of his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. Huh. Absolutely. There was an autograph letter completely handwritten that was not known to exist that went for well over $100,000 last year. Absolutely.
Now this letter, I believe, in looking at it, is signed T. Roosevelt.
T. Roosevelt. When he got out of the presidency, he started the think tank, our Progressive Party, and his magazine was The Outlook that he was editor of. And he paid a great deal of attention to people that wrote him because they had a lot of the same political affinity that he did, and he signed a lot of stuff that he corresponded religiously with people.
Well, now, would he typically sign his letters T. Roosevelt?
Typically, it's more valuable to get a Theodore Roosevelt. I personally would rather have a T. Roosevelt talking about the Progressive Party myself from a historical basis. Right.
Is that a good way to tell a fake? Let's say Babe Ruth, if it was George Herman Ruth, more than likely that would maybe not be real?
Well, he signed all of his checks G.H. Ruth.
Ah.
So
if you've got a check signed Babe Ruth,
you got to wonder about it.
Yeah.
Although where they get the check at. Although that you can get blank checks, or that one can manufacture blank checks. So, and then that you get into paper, that you get into the type pen and pencil, graphite, lead used in pencils. An autograph by a pencil won't be permanent for 100 years. So, you know, if it's supposed to be 150 years old and if you can erase the end of it, you've got a problem.
All right. I'm going to look at this one. Now, this is a very impressive document signed by President James Madison. That's a beautiful document. What is the document?
That is a patent for gun turrets on a battleship from the early 1800s, obviously, but who signed it? And it is a 4-page document. That's just the front you can see. Inside there are drawings, and there's a spec list of all it takes to do this, and that's an actual patent from the U.S. government for the manufacture of a gun turret for a gunboat.
Wow, that's way ahead of its time in the early 19th century.
And I really, he's probably my favorite president, James Madison, because the father of the Constitution and just a solid guy.
The document itself is made of, is that paper?
That's vellum. That's lambskin.
I was thinking it might be.
Yes.
Now, how long would that last?
Well, this lasted 200 years.
Yeah, well, and looks to be in pretty good shape from
Absolutely.
taking a look at it.
Absolutely. Let's see that for a second. Let's see. We'll slide this up for a minute. Here you go. You're holding history, and that you can open it up inside and look if you want to.
It's incredible. The condition is
And see all the writing inside?
Wow. Amazing.
There is writing inside, right?
There is indeed. Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yes, there is.
I got the wrong piece, I was afraid.
Indeed.
And when you're buying a document like that, that's better than just an average land grant. That's a piece of history, and that would also suffice the military collector because of what the patent refers to, but also the seal's on it intact, which is quite neat for a 200-year-old document.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's move back a bit to some sports. Familiar faces here. Muhammad Ali on the top, and Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco. I think it was safe to say controversial baseball players involving steroids or allegations thereof. How did you get these?
If you look real close on the bottom left at the top and the bottom right on the bottom, there is a PSA DNA sticker that you've heard me talk about.
Correct.
And that number with the PSA DNA sticker, that corresponds with an online registry, where if I decided to sell that, someone that was knowledgeable about the mechanics of this, could go online and determine whether or not that was how it was supposed to be. And those were bought online from a friend of mine who's a dealer, and he's just solid as he can be.
Muhammad Ali on the top. That's actually a famous photo.
Yeah.
How did you get that? Bought from a dealer also?
Bought from the same dealer. Yes, sir.
On the back, the first governor of Kentucky, Isaac Shelby.
Yes.
Now, what is that document?
That is a land grant. No, it's not. I have a land grant. I apologize. He had appointed Archibald Bilbo sheriff of Mercer County.
Kentucky.
Mercer County, Kentucky, absolutely. And it's signed in 1813 during his second term as Kentucky governor. And I brought that for you. I thought you'd appreciate him.
Fascinating. Indeed it is. Again, in the way of sports as well as Hollywood, the famous movie about the women baseball players in World War II. This is actually the Peaches.
Yes, sir. There are eight peaches there, from the Rockford Peaches, the last 8 that were around to sign. And I had that managed as peachable as I could color-wise.
It is. Well, now, are any of these women the ones played in the movies?
No. Well, now, there were some of the original Peaches and some of the other baseball teams. They were there as extras, and that you'll see some of them at the end of the movie actually playing baseball. I mean, there's 67-year-old women hitting as good as Mark McGuire and running the bases. You've probably seen that in the movie. Those are the real ball players.
Yeah. Well, the autographs of the women you have here, were any of them played in the movie? Were they represented?
Well, that's the neat thing about the movie, that Penny Marshall said that she would mix the names up, or that she couldn't say, but that was my grandma, or that was my aunt, or whatever. Well, there was a Dottie, but the Dottie's last name doesn't match up with the Dottie I want it to be, Dottie Kamenchak, who was a very famous female ball player. So that we're going to assume that that's the Dottie that she was portraying. Absolutely.
Now, the last one we have has got to be one of the most bizarre.
Absolutely.
It is a scrawled letter, front and back, from
Charles Manson. He reads the paper.
Tell us how you got this.
In the mid-1980s, the Paducah Sun-Democrat, as it was called back then, had a weekly feature called The Extra. You may remember that. And there was a young lady that worked there. I think her last name was Branstetter or Obama. I do not
Jeannie Branstetter.
Jeannie Branstetter.
Yes.
I think she works for the Crittenden County Press now.
May well do. I don't know.
She wrote a story about my autograph collecting, and it made the Extra, and I had the cover of some autographs on the front of it. Well, the Associated Press, I know that you know how they work, picked up on it and they run it all over the country. Well, Charles Manson reads a newspaper.
Now, he's imprisoned where? At San Quentin?
I think, well, it'll tell us right there. Oh, that's the wrong envelope. I'm sorry, that's a different
Well, he's in
person.
prison in California
Yes,
somewhere.
sir.
Right.
Absolutely. And
So he picks up a local paper, sees this story.
No, well, yes, sir, he did. He put up a local paper there, and of course he has fans and following people that contact him through the mail and see him on a weekly basis.
That's
probably
pretty unnerving.
Yes, I don't like to think about it. And he had someone figure out where Eddyville, Kentucky was, and they contacted the newspaper, which at that time was owned by Francis and Charles Backus, who said, well, yes, Tim's up at the law office, and here's how to get a hold of Tim. So this letter came to me at the law office asking us to take care of a legal matter for him. He's from Muhlenberg County, Kentucky.
That amazed me. I did
Up
not
by the Green
know.
River where the bluegrass
That's
grows.
right.
That's
That's
exactly right.
That's right.
And someone either was brilliant or a brick short, asked him to hand make some items to sell to raise funds for the Muhlenberg County Theater Group, which he did. And there's a description of what the items looked like. He sent them, and they decided not to sell them, or they took bids and didn't sell them. Whatever it was, they really, really made him mad. And he wanted us to get his items back for him. And so this letter came explaining his situation, listing the items he made, and it's signed 2 or 3 times. It gives legal notice. It is quite an oddity for a Manson letter to get. And I find it interesting because it's a 2-page handwritten letter, but right in the middle of it, in this very lucid, sound, reasonable letter, he throws some junk in for the censors to read that he's acting crazy, fighting bulls and stuff. It's really neat.
This would be maybe the strangest thing you've got.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And I wasn't expecting it. I didn't ask for it. It just came through the mail, and you open it up, and you're like, what is this? And when I received the item, it was folded in a pyramid. But you may be able to tell all that. It was folded in a really, really odd manner.
Yes, I can
and
see
he
that.
signed his name crudely with a swastika through the middle of it, which of course I don't approve of, but I also didn't ask for the letter either, but I've kept up with it nonetheless. It's quite interesting.
Absolutely, yes, yes, yes. Didn't he have a swastika on his head or something?
I believe he did.
Yeah, yeah.
Geraldo interviewed him in the 80s, and I remember that interview.
Yeah, yeah. And we're almost out of time. One presidential autograph you mentioned to me before, which you didn't bring, is a president named Gerald Ford, but your signature does not say Gerald Ford. What does it say?
I have one that says Leslie King Jr.
Leslie King Jr.
Yes, sir.
If you were to ask somebody, when was Leslie King Jr. president, they would look at you with obviously a strange look. How did you get that?
I asked him to sign his name that way.
And that was because he was adopted as Gerald Ford?
He is Leslie King Jr. And his father died, who was Leslie King Sr., imagine that. And the lady that his wife married was Gerald Ford Sr., who adopted him, henceforth Gerald Ford Jr.
Well, they're frantically signaling that we're out of time.
I don't blame them.
My guest today was Tim Beck. I'm Barry Craig. We're out of time. We will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.